My name is Eliana Vaughn and I am 34 years old. 2 weeks ago, I stood at a podium in front of 600 people in the grand ballroom of the Worthington Hotel in Chicago and accepted the highest honor my university has ever given to a living graduate. The chancellor handed me a crystal plaque and shook my hand, and when I turned to face the audience, I saw him. Fifth row center seat. My father, Dr. Richard Vaughn, distinguished professor of constitutional law at the very university that was honoring me. His face was doing something I had never seen in 34 years of being his daughter. It was crumbling, not with pride, not with joy, with the slow catastrophic recognition that the daughter he had laughed at, the daughter he had told to lower her expectations, the daughter whose tuition he refused to pay while funding her brother's entire Ivy League ride, had just been introduced to a standing ovation as the youngest dean in the 160-year history of his own institution. But I need to take you back, way back, because that moment in the ballroom didn't come out of nowhere. It was built over 16 years of silence, rejection, and a kind of loneliness that sits in your chest like a stone you eventually learn to breathe around. Before we get into the rest of this story, I want to ask you something. If you have ever been underestimated by the one person who was supposed to believe in you, hit that subscribe button. And if you already know where this is going, drop your prediction in the comments. I want to hear it. Now let me take you back to the fall of 2007 and a dining room in Evanston, Illinois, where my father sat at the head of a table he treated like a bench. Growing up in the Vaughn house, you need to understand there was a hierarchy and it was never subtle. My father was a man who organized his entire world into categories of merit, and you knew within the first 5 minutes of any conversation exactly which category he had placed you in. At the top was my brother Marcus, 3 years older, sharp jaw, easy smile, the kind of kid who could argue both sides of any debate and make the teacher thank him for it afterward. Marcus was built in my father's image, and my father never let anyone forget it. At dinner, Marcus would reference a Supreme Court case and Dad would lean back in his chair with his arms crossed and this look on his face like he was watching his own reflection become something better. "That's my boy," he would say. "That instinct right there is what separates thinkers from followers." Then there was me. I was not a follower. I was a reader. I was the girl who finished every book on the summer reading list by July 4th and then went to the public library and asked the librarian for more. I was the girl who won the county spelling bee 3 years in a row and placed second in the state geography competition, and once corrected a substitute teacher's pronunciation of Pythagorean and got sent to the principal's office for it. But none of that registered in the Vaughn household the way Marcus debating immigration policy at age 14 did. Because my father didn't value knowledge. He valued a very specific kind of performance. The kind that looked like him. My mother, Catherine, was a high school English teacher. Gentle, thoughtful. The kind of woman who left annotated poems on your pillow when she knew you were sad. She saw me. I know she did. But seeing me and fighting for me were two different things, and my mother had long ago made her peace with which one she was capable of. She would squeeze my hand under the table when Dad dismissed something I said. She would leave a new novel on my bed after a particularly bad dinner. But she never once said, "Richard, that's enough." She never once stood between his indifference and my heart. I don't blame her for that anymore. It took me a long time to get there, but I understand now that she was surviving too. She had married a man whose approval was the sun in their household, and she had learned, the way all of us eventually learn, that you either orbited him or you froze. She chose orbit. I chose something else. Let me give you a specific memory because I think specifics matter more than summaries. 7th grade. I had been selected for a gifted writers program at Northwestern. This was a big deal. 30 students from across the state chosen based on a portfolio submission. I had submitted a short story about a girl who builds a boat in her backyard and sails it across Lake Michigan alone. The selection committee called it remarkably mature and emotionally precise for a 12-year-old. I brought the acceptance letter to dinner. I waited until Marcus finished talking about mock trial because you always waited until Marcus finished. Then I slid the letter across the table toward my father. He picked it up. "Read it. Set it down." "A writing program," he said. "At Northwestern," I said. "It's competitive. Only 30 kids in the state." He looked at me over his glasses the way he looked at first-year law students who cited the wrong amendment. "Eliana, writing is a hobby. It's not a path. Don't confuse attention with opportunity." He went back to his pot roast. Mom squeezed my hand under the table. I went to the program that summer. My mother drove me every Saturday morning for 8 weeks. Dad never asked about it, not once. When the program ended and I came home with a certificate and a letter from the director recommending me for an advanced track, I put it in my desk drawer and never showed it to anyone. I learned something that summer that I wouldn't fully understand until years later. My father's disinterest wasn't passive, it was architectural. Every dismissal, every turned head, every "that's nice, Eliana" was a brick in a wall he was building between me and the idea that I could be extraordinary. He wasn't ignoring me, he was containing me. Because if I became something remarkable, it would mean his metric for greatness had been wrong all along. And my father would rather lose a daughter than be wrong. Senior year of high school. This is when the first real fracture happened, the one that made everything after it possible. I had applied to 7 colleges. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Reeves, had helped me put together what she called one of the strongest applications she had seen in 20 years. My GPA was 4.3 weighted. I had near perfect SAT scores. I had the writing program, the spelling bees, 3 years of debate team where I was the only sophomore to ever make varsity, a published essay in the Chicago Tribune's Student Voices section, and 400 hours of volunteer work at a literacy nonprofit where I tutored adults learning to read English. I applied to 4 reach schools, to matches, and 1 safety. I was playing the odds the way you're supposed to. Marcus had gone to Columbia 3 years earlier. Full ride. Dad had thrown a dinner party. 30 people in our backyard. A banner that said Columbia Law bound even though Marcus was going for undergrad and law school was years away. Dad didn't care. He was already narrating the future. My acceptances came in April. I got into 6 of 7. The only rejection was Harvard, and honestly, I wasn't surprised. But I got into the University of Chicago. I got into Northwestern. I got into Michigan. I got into Emory. I got into Wisconsin and my safety, Boston University. I laid all 6 acceptance letters on the dining room table on a Sunday afternoon. I arranged them in a row like evidence, which I suppose they were. Evidence that I was not what my father had decided I was. Dad came in from his study. He was holding a journal, one of those law reviews he was always reading, red pen tucked behind his ear. He looked at the letters. He picked up the University of Chicago one first. Read it. Set it down. For what he said. I'm sorry? What's the major? What's the plan? English, I said. Then graduate school for education. I want to eventually work in academic administration. He made a sound. Not a laugh exactly. Something worse. A half exhale through his nose. The sound you make when someone tells you something so absurd it doesn't even deserve a full reaction. Eliana, you want to be a secretary at a college? Academic administration is not secretarial work. Dad, deans, provosts, university presidents. These are leadership roles. They shape policy. They control budgets. They determine the direction of entire institutions. He set down his journal. You want to compete in that world. He didn't say it with cruelty exactly. That's what made it so devastating. He said it with genuine bewilderment. Like I had told him I wanted to compete in the Olympics despite never having run a race. Like the gap between who I was and what I wanted was so enormous that even discussing it was a waste of time. Marcus is clerking for a federal judge this summer, he said, picking up his journal again. Maybe talk to him about setting realistic expectations. He walked back into his study. I stood at that table for a long time. 6 acceptance letters in a row. 6 schools that had looked at my record and said yes. And my father's back disappearing down the hallway. That night I went to my mother's room. She was reading in bed, glasses on, lamp making that warm circle on the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed. Mom, I need help paying for school. She took off her glasses. How much? I told her. Even with scholarships and aid, the gap was significant. The University of Chicago wasn't cheap, and while I had received a partial scholarship, there was still tuition, housing, books, the cost of actually living in a city. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised me. Talk to your father. I stared at her. Mom, he just told me I want to be a secretary. She closed her book. Eliana, he paid for Marcus. Every penny. Columbia isn't cheap either. If you present it to him as an investment, if you show him the numbers, maybe. I didn't believe her, but I did it because I had run out of options and because some part of me, the 12-year-old who slid a letter across the dinner table, still believed that the right evidence could change the verdict. The next evening I knocked on his study door. He was at his desk, laptop open, reading glasses on. The room smelled like coffee and old paper. Legal volumes lined every wall, floor to ceiling. I had prepared a folder. I'm serious. I made a presentation. Tuition breakdown, scholarship amount, estimated cost of living, projected salary ranges for university administrators at various levels, average time to promotion, comparative ROI against other graduate tracks. I had spent 4 hours on it. I sat across from him and opened the folder. Dad, I'd like to talk about funding for college. He didn't look up from his laptop. Funding. You paid for Marcus's full tuition at Columbia. I'm asking for the same support. I have scholarships covering about 40%. I need help with the rest. He looked up now. Marcus is pursuing law. Eliana, there's a clear trajectory. Law school, clerkship, partnership. That's an investment with a return. What you're describing is you want me to write a check so you can go read novels for years and then answer phones at a university. That's not what academic administration is. He leaned back. Let me ask you something. If I gave you $200,000, what's the guarantee? What's the outcome I'm buying? The same outcome you bought with Marcus. An education. He smiled. Then, and this is the part I will never forget as long as I live, it wasn't a mean smile. It wasn't even dismissive. It was amused. Genuinely amused. Like a child had said something precocious and incorrect, and the adult found it charming. Then he laughed. Not a big laugh. A short, quiet laugh that lasted maybe 2 seconds. But those 2 seconds contain everything. Every science fair he never attended. Every story he never read. Every certificate that went into a drawer instead of onto a wall. Every time he'd looked at Marcus like he was seeing the future and looked at me like he was seeing furniture. He laughed, and then he said, Eliana, I love you, but I'm not going to fund a fantasy. You're a smart girl. Get a job. Take out loans. If this path is real, it'll survive without my money. Marcus didn't need to prove his path was real. You just believed in it because it looked like yours. He put his glasses back on. That conversation was over. I stood up and closed the folder and walked out and went to my room and sat on my bed in the dark. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. Not because I'm tough or stoic, but because something else was happening. Something that felt like a door closing and a window opening at the same time. A kind of terrible clarity. He would never see me. Not because I was invisible, but because seeing me would cost him something he wasn't willing to pay. His certainty, his framework, his belief that he had already identified the exceptional child in this family and it wasn't me. I couldn't change his mind, but I could change everything else. I want to pause here for a second. If your own father or mother ever made you feel like your dreams weren't worth investing in, drop a comment below. Tell me what you did next. Because what I did next is the reason I'm standing where I am today. I chose the University of Chicago. I took out federal loans. I applied for every scholarship I could find and I found 7 more small ones, $500 here, $1,000 there. An essay contest from a local women's organization that gave me $2,500 for writing about educational equity. I worked 2 jobs my entire freshman year. Mornings, I shelved books at the campus library. Evenings, I tutored undergraduate athletes in writing. I ate dining hall food on a budget so tight I knew which stations had the most calorie-dense options for the lowest meal plan cost. I never went hungry, but I never stopped calculating either. My mother sent me $200 a month. She didn't tell my father. She wrote checks from her personal account, the one she kept from her teaching salary, and mailed them in envelopes with no return address. Every envelope had a sticky note inside. One said, "Keep climbing." One said, "I'm proud of you today." One just said, "I love you, E." I kept every single one. Marcus graduated from Columbia the same year I started at Chicago. Dad threw another party. Bigger this time. 50 people. A toast with actual champagne. Marcus got into Columbia Law the following fall. Dad called everyone he knew. I heard about it from my mother in one of her monthly calls. Your father is over the moon, she said. Her voice was careful, measured. I bet, Eliana, he does love you. I know, Mom. He just loves Marcus more accurately. She didn't correct me. At Chicago, something happened that changed the trajectory of everything. I met Dr. Josephine Achabe, professor of higher education policy, Department of Education, Jamaican-born, Oxford-educated, 5'2" with a voice that could fill a lecture hall without a microphone. She wore reading glasses on a gold chain, and she had this way of looking at you when you spoke that made you feel like your words were being weighed on a jeweler's scale. I took her seminar fall of sophomore year. The Politics of Access in American Higher Education. First day, she asked the class a question. Who in this room has ever been told they don't belong in a space they earn the right to be in? I raised my hand. She looked at me, held my gaze for a beat. Stay after class. I did. She was packing her bag at the podium. Didn't look up. What's your name? Eliana Vaughn. She stopped packing. Looked up. Vaughn. Any relation to Richard Vaughn at the law school here? He's my father. She studied me for a long moment. Then she said something I didn't fully understand until years later. Interesting. You raised your hand. He never would have. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She became my mentor, not in the casual way people throw that word around. Not a professor who answered extra emails or wrote a recommendation letter. Joa Achebe became the intellectual parent I had never had. She read every paper I wrote with the same forensic attention my father gave his law review articles, except when she finished. She looked up and said, "Tell me more." Those 2 words, "tell me more." I had never heard them in my father's house. Not once in 18 years. She pushed me harder than any teacher ever had. She told me my writing was good but undisciplined. She told me I had a habit of hedging my arguments because I'd been trained to doubt my own conclusions. She told me I use qualifiers like I think and perhaps and it seems like as shields and that I needed to stop apologizing for having a point of view. You write like someone who's been told her opinion is a hobby, she said once. Red pen slashing through a paragraph I had spent 3 hours on. Stop asking permission to be right. Junior year, she called me into her office. She had a file open on her desk. There's a doctoral program I want you to consider. Fully funded, stipend, research assistantship. It's at this university. I looked at the file. The program was in higher education leadership and policy. The director was Dr. Achebe herself. You want me to apply here? For a PAAHDAADDDDHEHE? I want you to stop thinking 2 steps ahead and start thinking 10. You have a talent for systems, Eliana. Not just understanding them but seeing where they break and knowing how to fix them. That's not common. That's not a hobby. That's a career. She closed the file. But I should tell you something. The advisory board for this program includes faculty from the law school. Your father may be asked to weigh in on admissions at some point. I want you to know that going in. My stomach dropped. Will that be a problem? I asked. She looked at me over her glasses. Only if you let it. I graduated summa cum laude in the spring of 2011. My mother came to the ceremony. She sat in the 3rd row and cried when they called my name and took 40 photographs on a disposable camera because she said her phone camera wasn't good enough for this. My father did not come. He had a faculty senate meeting. That's what he told my mother. She relayed this to me the night before graduation with the particular strain in her voice that told me she knew it was an excuse and wanted me to know she knew without actually saying it. Marcus sent a text. Congrats, sis. Proud of you. I responded with a thumbs up emoji, not because I was angry at Marcus. Marcus had never been cruel to me. He had simply existed in the space our father built for him and never once looked over the wall to see who was on the other side. His obliviousness wasn't malicious. It was comfortable. And comfort, he had learned from the master, was more important than curiosity. That night after the ceremony, my mother and I went to a restaurant near campus. Small Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. She ordered a glass of wine, which she almost never did. She raised it. To my daughter, the graduate. The first Dr. Vaughn I'll actually be impressed by. She winked. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind I didn't get to have very often. Then she got quiet. Ellie and I need to tell you something. Your father doesn't know you graduated summa cum laude. He doesn't know about the doctoral program. He stopped asking about you after your first year. I've been updating him and he listens, but he doesn't ask. I want you to hear that from me and not find out later. I set my fork down. He stopped asking. She nodded. It's not that he doesn't care. She trailed off. He doesn't think it matters, I said. She didn't argue. We finished dinner. She hugged me in the parking lot for a long time. She smelled like the perfume she'd worn my whole life, something floral and slightly faded, the way memories smell when you revisit them. I watched her drive away. Then I went back to my apartment and opened my laptop and began the application for the doctoral program that would eventually put me in a position my father never imagined. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted to build something that couldn't be dismissed with a laugh and a wave. The PAAHDAADDDDHEHE years were the hardest and the best years of my life. And I need you to understand both of those things equally, because one without the other would be a lie. Hard, because a doctoral program in higher education policy is not what people imagine when they think of graduate school. It's not sitting in a library looking thoughtful. It's 14-hour days of research, design, statistical analysis, policy briefs, institutional review board applications, grant writing, teaching undergraduate sections, attending conferences where you present your work to rooms full of people who have been doing this for 30 years and are looking for any weakness in your methodology. Hard because I was studying the very institution my father worked at, walking the same campus, occasionally seeing his name on building directories, on faculty listservs, on the acknowledgments page of colleagues' publications. He was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost with tenure. Hard because in my second year of the program, my mother was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. She called me on a Tuesday. Her voice was strange, not scared exactly, bewildered, like someone who had walked into a room and forgotten not just why they were there but what rooms were for. Eliana, I went to the doctor today. The diagnosis hit me like a physical thing. I sat on the floor of my office in the education building and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. Students walked past my open door. One of them asked if I was okay. I said yes. I was not okay. I called my father that evening. First time in over a year. He picked up on the third ring. Eliana. Dad, Mom told me about the diagnosis. Silence. She's going to need help, I said. I'm aware. More silence. I could hear the television in the background. Sports? He was watching sports while I was trying to talk about our mother's brain disappearing. Dad, I think we should talk about a care plan. I've been researching facilities and home care options and I've got it handled. What does that mean? It means I'm her husband and I'll take care of it. You focus on whatever it is you're doing out there. Whatever it is I'm doing. I'm getting a PAAHDAADDDDHEHE, Dad, at your university. The pause was so long I checked to make sure the call was still connected. Your university, he repeated. I'm in the education doctoral program. I have been for 2 years. Another pause. When did that happen? 2 years ago, Dad. I just told you. I heard him exhale. That familiar sound. Half breath, half dismissal. Well, good for you, Eliana. I hope it works out. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to make some calls about your mother's insurance. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand. Whatever it is you're doing out there. He didn't even know I was 300 yards from his office. He didn't know because he never asked and nobody told him because everyone in this family had learned that information about Eliana was not information Richard Vaughn was interested in receiving. Dr. Achabi found me in my office the next morning. Eyes red. Coffee cold. She sat down across from me and said nothing for a full minute. Then, tell me. I told her. All of it. The diagnosis, the phone call, whatever it is you're doing out there. She listened. Then she leaned forward. Eliana, I've watched you for years now. You are one of the most gifted students I have ever worked with, and I have worked with many. You see systems the way surgeons see anatomy. You understand where the fractures are and how to set them. Your dissertation is going to change how this university and others like it think about first-generation access. That is not whatever. That is everything. And if your father can't see it, then his vision is the problem, not your worth. I didn't cry, but something released in my chest. A knot I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. She stood up. Now. Chapter 3. My desk. Thursday. No extensions. That was Joe. I visited my mother every 2 weeks. The drive from campus to my parents' house was 22 minutes. I could have done it more often, but every visit meant the possibility of seeing my father, and every encounter with my father left me gutted for days. Mom was still mostly herself in those early months. She'd forget small things, where she put her keys, what day of the week it was, whether she'd already told me a story. But she'd look at me and I could see it in her eyes. The recognition, the knowing. She knew who I was. She knew what I was doing. She was proud. She told me every visit. My brilliant girl, she would say, holding my face in her hands. You're going to run the whole thing someday. I didn't know what she meant by the whole thing. I think she meant everything. I think she meant the world. Mothers say things like that and you don't realize until later that they were being literal. Dad was usually in his study during my visits. Sometimes he'd come out for coffee and we'd stand in the kitchen in a silence so thick you could lean against it. He'd ask about the weather. I'd ask about the house. We'd both avoid every subject that mattered. Once, and only once, he asked about my program. How's the degree going? It's going well. I'm starting my dissertation research. What's it on? First generation student retention and institutional accountability structures. He stirred his coffee, took a sip. Sounds theoretical. It's empirical actually. Quantitative and qualitative mixed methods. I'm partnering with 3 universities for the dataset. He nodded. The nod of a man who has already stopped listening but wants credit for having started. Good luck with it. He went back to his study. Good luck with it. As if I were buying a lottery ticket instead of producing original research that 3 major educational policy journals would eventually publish. I finished my dissertation and for years, Dr. Achebe told me it was the strongest she had overseen in her career. The defense was scheduled for a Friday in April. 3 hours in front of a committee of 5 faculty members including 2 external reviewers from Stanford and Georgetown. I sent my father an email the week before. Formal, polite. I told him the date, time, and location. I told him it was open to the public. I told him I'd like him to be there. He responded 3 days later. One line. I have a faculty meeting that conflicts. Good luck, E. The E was new. He'd never shortened my name before. I think it was supposed to be affectionate. It felt like he was abbreviating me the way he abbreviated his interest in my life. Just taking a little off the top, making me smaller and more manageable. I defended my dissertation for 3 hours and 12 minutes. The committee asked questions that were rigorous and fair and I answered every one. When it was over, they conferred for 9 minutes and came back. Dr. Achebe was smiling before she sat down. Congratulations, Dr. Vaughn. My mother wasn't there. By then the Alzheimer's had progressed. She couldn't travel. She wouldn't have understood the proceedings. But my phone buzzed an hour later. A text from the caregiver I'd helped my father hire. Your mom keeps saying tell Eliane I knew. She says it over and over. I thought you'd want to know. I sat in my car in the parking garage and read that text 6 times. Then I cried. The first real cry in years. Not for the degree or the defense or my father's empty chair. For my mother, who, even in the fog of a disease that was stealing her from me piece by piece, was still trying to reach through and say, I see you. After the PAAHDAAIDDDDHEHE, I entered the academic administration track at full speed. Associate Director of Student Affairs at the University of Michigan, then Director of Academic Programs at Northwestern, then Associate Dean of Undergraduate Education at Boston University. Each job bigger, each move strategic, each role building the resume that Jo Achebe and I had mapped out on a whiteboard in her office 6 years earlier. I was good at this work. Not good in the way people say good when they mean competent. I was transformational. At Michigan, I redesigned the first-year advising system and retention rates among first-generation students increased 23% into years. At Northwestern, I overhauled the curriculum review process and 3 departments that had been on probation came off within 18 months. At BU, I launched an equity audit program that became a model cited by the Department of Education. I wasn't just climbing, I was building. Every institution I touched got better, and the people inside those institutions knew it. My teams respected me, my colleagues trusted me, the students I advocated for felt seen in ways I never had. And through all of it, I carried the quiet knowledge that my father had no idea. He didn't know about Michigan. He didn't know about Northwestern. He certainly didn't know about BU. My mother couldn't tell him anymore. Marcus and I spoke twice a year at most. Surface-level conversations about holidays and weather. Marcus had become exactly what Dad predicted, a partner at a white-shoe law firm in Manhattan, a life so polished and predictable it could have been ordered from a catalog. I didn't hide my career from my father. I just stopped offering information to someone who had made it clear that information about me was not something he valued. And then came the call, February of this year. A number I didn't recognize. Chicago area code, Dr. Vaughn. This is Charles Whitmore. I'm the chair of the search committee at the University of Chicago. We're conducting a national search for a new dean of the college and your name has come up multiple times. I'd like to discuss the position with you. I was standing in my kitchen in Boston. It was snowing outside. My partner Diane was making pasta in the background and humming something I couldn't quite place. The dean of the college at the University of Chicago. My university. My father's university. The place where I had been an undergraduate and a doctoral student. The institution where Dr. Richard Vaughn had taught constitutional law for 28 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. It hit me like a wave, like the universe had spent 16 years assembling the pieces of the most elaborate cosmic joke imaginable and was now sitting back with its arms crossed waiting to see if I'd laugh. "I'd like to learn more," I said. My voice was steady. Inside I was anything but. The search process took for months. 4 months of interviews, campus visits, presentations to faculty senates, meetings with provosts and board members and student government
leaders. For months of being evaluated by every metric imaginable, scholarly record, administrative experience, vision, temperament, ability to navigate politics without being consumed by them. I was one of 3 finalists. The other 2 were a dean from Duke and a provost from Berkeley, both older, both male, both excellent. But during my campus visit, I walked past the law school building where my father's office was. 3rd floor, corner window. I could see his bookshelf from the sidewalk. For a moment I stood there looking up at that window the way I used to look up at the dinner table, waiting for recognition that never came. Then I kept walking. The call came on a Thursday evening in June. Charles Whitmore's voice had a different quality this time, lighter, like a man about to deliver news he'd been looking forward to sharing. "Dr. Vaughan, it is my genuine pleasure to inform you that the search committee has unanimously selected you as the next dean of the college at the University of Chicago. The Board of Trustees has ratified the decision. We'd like to make the announcement at the annual gala in September." I thanked him, professional, composed, gracious. Then I hung up and sat on the kitchen floor, and Diane sat down next to me, and I told her, and she put her arms around me, and we stayed there for a long time, on the floor, in the kitchen, in the quiet. I didn't call my father. I need you to understand why. This wasn't about revenge. It was never about revenge. Revenge requires you to orient your life toward the person who hurt you, and I had stopped doing that years ago. I didn't call him because I had learned, through years of therapy and mentorship, and the slow, painful work of becoming a whole person, that his approval was not the thing I was building toward. I was building toward my own standard, my own measure, and I had met it. If he found out, he found out. If he didn't, the accomplishment didn't become less real. But here's the thing about working at the same institution as your estranged father. He was going to find out, and the way he found out is a moment I will carry with me forever. Now, I need to stop here for a second. What do you think happened when my father learned that his daughter, the one he laughed at, the one whose tuition he refused to pay, the one whose career he called a fantasy, was about to become his boss's boss's boss? Drop your answer in the comments, because what actually happened was stranger and more painful and more human than anything I could have predicted. The university sent the announcement via email to all faculty and staff on a Monday morning in August, 8 a.m. A formal communication from the provost's office. "Dear colleagues, it is with great pride that we announce the appointment of Dr. Eliana Vaughan as the 34th Dean of the College effective October 1st. Dr. Vaughan brings a distinguished record of scholarly achievement and administrative excellence, including positions at the University of Michigan, Northwestern University, and Boston University. She is also a proud alumna of our institution, having earned both her bachelor's and doctoral degrees here. Please join us in welcoming her at the annual gala on September 14th. I'm told by a colleague in the law school, a woman named Patricia, who had been Joe Achebe's friend for 20 years and who had quietly kept track of my career at Joe's request, that my father read the email at his desk. She was in the office next door. She heard nothing at first. Then she heard his chair push back. Then silence. Then she heard him say one word. No, not a question, not denial exactly. More like the sound of a man discovering that gravity works differently than he thought. The ground he'd been standing on for 28 years had just shifted and he was trying to find his footing. Patricia told me he left his office 10 minutes later. He didn't teach his afternoon seminar. His TA covered it. He didn't come back to campus for 2 days. What he did during those 2 days, I don't know for certain, but I know he visited my mother. The caregiver told me. He sat with her for 4 hours. She didn't recognize him most of the time, but he sat there anyway. The caregiver heard him talking to her at one point. She did it, Kath. The girl did it. The girl, not Eliana, not our daughter. The girl. Like I was a character in a story he was only now reading for the first time. Marcus called me that same week Eliana. His voice was careful. I just heard about the deanship at UChicago. Word travels fast. I talked to Dad. I didn't say anything. I let the silence do its work. He's having a hard time with this, Marcus said. I felt something tighten in my chest. He's having a hard time, I repeated. I think he feels what Marcus. What does he feel? Because I have spent 16 years not knowing what that man feels, and I'm not sure one phone call from you is going to illuminate it. Silence. He wants to talk to you. He has had 16 years to talk to me. He has had my phone number the entire time. He chose not to use it. That was his decision. I'm not going to make this easy for him just because the power dynamic finally shifted. Marcus paused. That's fair, he said quietly. But Eliana, he's an old man and Mum is. And he knows he. I know Marcus. But knowing and doing are different things. He taught me that. We hung up. Not in anger. In exhaustion. The exhaustion of a family that had spent decades performing a dysfunction so practiced it felt like tradition. The gala was September 14th, the Worthington Hotel Grand Ballroom. 600 guests, faculty, trustees, donors, alumni, the full institutional apparatus dressed in evening wear and drinking Prosecco. I prepared my remarks for 3 weeks, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew that what I said in that room would define my deanship before it even began. First impressions at this level aren't impressions. They're foundations. Diane helped me choose a dress. Simple, navy, a single gold necklace that had been my mother's. The one she wore to my college graduation when she was still herself, when she still remembered all the words to the pride she felt. The ballroom was full when I arrived. Charles Whitmore met me at the entrance. He shook my hand and said something about making history, and I smiled and thanked him and scanned the room, the way you do when you know someone might be there. And he was. 5th row, center seat. My father, Dr. Richard Vaughan, 71 years old. Grey now, thinner than I remembered. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize, which meant he'd bought it for this occasion. His hands were in his lap, and he was looking straight ahead at the empty podium, with an expression I had never once in 34 years of being his daughter seen on his face. Fear, not of me, of the moment, of what it meant, of the 16 years of evidence he was about to be confronted with in front of every colleague he had ever worked with. I walked to the podium. The applause was enormous. A standing ovation before I had said a single word. 600 people on their feet, except one. My father remained seated. Not out of protest, out of inability. His legs wouldn't hold him. I could see it from the stage, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair, his jaw working, his eyes fixed on me with something I had waited 34 years to see but never imagined would look so much like grief. I gave my remarks. I talked about the university's mission. I talked about access and equity and the responsibility of elite institutions to be worthy of the word elite. I talked about the students who arrive on this campus carrying not just textbooks but the weight of families who don't understand what they're doing here, and the even heavier weight of families who don't care. That line was not in my prepared remarks. It came out of me the way truth sometimes does, unbidden, unplanned, and irrevocable. In the audience, Patricia told me later my father closed his eyes. After the ceremony, there was a reception, white wine and small plates, and the kind of strategic mingling that happens when 600 people want something from the new dean. I moved through the room, shaking hands and answering questions and being genuinely present, because these people were my colleagues now, and they deserved my full attention. I saw my father across the room 3 times. Each time he was standing slightly apart from the nearest group, holding a glass he wasn't drinking from, watching me. Each time our eyes met, each time he looked like he was trying to cross a distance far greater than the 30 feet of ballroom floor between us. He didn't approach me. I didn't approach him. And that might have been the end of it. 2 people in the same room, separated by everything that matters. But then something happened that neither of us planned. I was standing near the bar talking to a group of faculty from the Humanities Division when a woman in a green dress approached. She was elderly, 80s probably, white hair pinned up, pearl earrings. She touched my arm. Dr. Vaughan, I'm Eleanor Calloway. I was on the faculty here for 40 years. I retired in 2005. It's a pleasure, Dr. Calloway.
She was a wonderful writer. She wrote a final paper about motherhood in the novels of George Eliot that was better than most of my graduate students' work. And after class one evening, she stayed behind and told me about her daughter. The quiet one, she said. The one who reads everything. She was so proud of you even then. She told me you were going to do something extraordinary. Those were her exact words. My throat closed. I just wanted you to know, Eleanor said. She saw it coming long before anyone else. She patted my arm and walked away. I stood there. The reception moved around me. Glasses clinked. Laughter rippled. And I stood very still, holding a glass of wine I would never drink, absorbing the fact that my mother had been telling strangers about me for decades. In classrooms I didn't know she attended. In conversations I was never meant to hear. She had been carrying me in her words long before the Alzheimer's stole them. I looked up. Across the room my father was watching me. He had seen the exchange. He had seen my face change. And now he was walking toward me. Slow, deliberate, the way he walked to the podium in his lecture hall. Except there was no podium here. No authority. No framework. Just a man walking toward his daughter with nothing in his hands. He stopped 3 feet away. Eliana, Dad. His jaw worked. His eyes were red. I didn't know, he said. About your mother's class. About what she told that woman. There's a lot you didn't know. He flinched. Slight but visible. I know. 2 words. Quiet. Stripped of everything. No performance. No lecture. No constitutional framework to hide behind. Just a man standing in the wreckage of his own choices, looking at the daughter-shaped hole he'd spent 16 years pretending wasn't there. I should have come, he said. To your graduation. Your defense. Everything. I should have been there. Yes, you should have. And the money. When you asked for help, I should have. His voice broke, not dramatically. A hairline crack, the kind you don't notice until the whole structure shifts. You laughed, I said. That's what I remember most. I brought you a folder with my entire future mapped out and you laughed. Not a cruel laugh. That might have been easier. You laughed like the idea of me succeeding was genuinely amusing. Like I had told a joke. He stared at me. Then he said something that gutted me. I know. I remember the folder. I remember every page. You read it? After you left the room. I picked it up and I read every page. The projections, the salary data, the ROI analysis. It was better than most briefs I've reviewed from my law students. Then why? Because if you were right, then I was wrong. About Marcus. About what matters. About everything I had built my identity around. And I chose myself over you. Every time. I chose being right over being your father. The ballroom hummed around us. 600 people. Crystal glasses. A string quartet playing something I couldn't identify. And in the middle of all of it, 2 people standing 3 feet apart, negotiating the distance of a lifetime. I didn't need you to be wrong about Marcus, I said. I needed you to be right about both of us. He put his hand over his mouth, pressed hard. His shoulders pulled in like he was trying to make himself smaller. I had never seen my father try to be small. His entire life was about expansion, about filling rooms, about commanding space. Can I? He started, then stopped. Tried again. Can I see her? Your mother. With you. Can I come with you to see her? I hadn't expected that. You visit her, I said. Every week. But she doesn't. She asks for you sometimes, Eliana. Your name is one of the last words she still has. I sit there and she says your name and I can't do anything because I'm the reason you're not there. That sentence landed like a scalpel. Clean and devastating. My mother, her mind dissolving, her language disappearing word by word, and my name was among the sounds she refused to let go of. She was holding on to me with the last syllables she had. I'll go with you, I said. Saturday. He nodded, quickly, like he was afraid the offer would evaporate. And Eliana, yeah, that folder. Do you still have it? I looked at him for a long moment. I have everything, Dad. Every sticky note Mom sent. Every certificate you never looked at. Every rejection letter I framed. Because they reminded me I had tried. I kept all of it. Not for you. For me. So I would never forget what I built this on. He stood there, a man who had spent his career teaching students how to build arguments, how to construct frameworks of logic and precedent that could withstand any challenge. And all of it, every tool he had, was useless here. Because this wasn't a case. This wasn't a debate. This was a daughter standing in front of her father and his only job was to feel it, to stand in it, to not turn away. He didn't turn away. We visited my mother on Saturday. I drove. He sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window the way people do when they're trying to hold something in. The caregiver let us in. Mom was in her chair by the window. She was having what the caregiver called a soft day. Quiet, present in the room but not quite in the world. I knelt beside her chair. "Hi, Mom. It's Eliana." She looked at me. Her eyes moved across my face slowly like she was reading something written in a language she almost remembered. Then she smiled. "My girl," she said. "My girl." I held her hand. Dad stood behind me. I could hear him breathing, heavy, controlled. A man trying very hard not to break apart in front of the two people he had failed most. Mom looked past me at him. "Who?" she said. "It's Richard Kath." "It's me." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at me. She leaned close. Her voice was a whisper. "Is he being nice to you?" I laughed. The laugh surprised me. It came from somewhere deep and real, from the part of me that remembered my mother as she was, fierce and gentle and always on my side, even when she couldn't say it loud enough. "He's trying, Mom." She patted my hand. "Good," she said. Then she closed her eyes and drifted. We sat with her for 2 hours. Dad and I didn't talk much, but somewhere in that silence, something shifted. Not a resolution, not forgiveness. Something smaller and more honest than either of those. An acknowledgement. We were in the same room, facing the same loss, and neither of us was pretending the other wasn't there. In the car on the way back, he asked me about my job. The real questions. What are your priorities for the first year? What's the biggest challenge you're inheriting? How's the faculty morale in the humanities division? I answered, carefully at first, then more openly, because these were good questions. The questions of a man who actually wanted to know. When I dropped him off at the house, he stood by the car door for a moment. "Eliana." "Yeah, Dad, your mother was right. She always said you'd run the whole thing." "I know. She told me too." He went inside. I sat in the car for 5 minutes. Then I drove back to my apartment and called Diane and told her everything. And she listened the way she always does, completely, without rushing toward solutions. When I finished, she said the thing I needed most to hear. "You did the hardest thing today. You let him back in without pretending. It doesn't hurt." I've been dean for 6 weeks now. My office is on the 3rd floor of the administration building. From my window, I can see the law school. Sometimes in the late afternoon, I see a figure in the 3rd floor corner office. We're too far apart to wave, but sometimes the light catches the window at the right angle and I can tell he's sitting at his desk, working, and I'm sitting at mine, working, and for the first time in our lives, we're doing the same thing, building something, in the same place, at the same time. He has come to 2 of my public lectures. He sits in the back row. He doesn't announce himself. He doesn't ask questions. He just listens. After the second one, I found a note in my faculty mailbox. His handwriting, cramped, precise, the penmanship of a man who has spent 40 years writing in margins. The lecture on institutional accountability was excellent. Your argument about structural incentives was tighter than anything in the current literature. I would have cited it. I put the note in the drawer with my mother's sticky notes. Same drawer, different section, progress. We have dinner once a month now. Dad, Marcus, Jennifer, Diane, and me. Awkward, stilted. Nobody knows the right rhythm yet. Marcus is trying. He apologized at the last dinner unprompted for never asking, for never looking over the wall. "I should have paid attention," he said. "I was so busy being the son he wanted that I never noticed he wasn't being the father you needed." That was the most honest thing Marcus has ever said to me. I told him I appreciated it. I told him appreciation and forgiveness are different things, and that I was offering the first one freely and working toward the second one slowly. He nodded. He understood, or he's starting to. My father and I are not fixed. I want to be clear about that. We are not a movie ending. We are 2 people sitting in the wreckage of a relationship that one of us neglected and the other one survived, trying to build something from what's left. Some days it feels possible. Some days I sit in my office and look at the law school and feel the old ache, the 12-year-old with the acceptance letter, the 18-year-old with the folder, the 26-year-old defending her dissertation to an empty chair. But I also feel something else now, something I didn't have for a long time. The quiet authority that comes from knowing you built your life with your own hands. No one gave me this office. No one opened this door. I knocked and knocked and knocked, and when nobody answered, I built my own door and walked through it. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, I want to say something to you directly. The people who are supposed to lift you up will sometimes be the ones who hold you down. Not because they're evil, not always. Sometimes because your rise threatens the story they've told themselves about who matters and how much. Your job is not to change their story. Your job is to write your own, and to write it so clearly and so boldly and with such undeniable evidence that when they finally read it, and they will finally read it, there is nothing left to say except I was wrong. You don't need their permission. You don't need their funding. You don't need their applause. You need your own belief, one good mentor, and the willingness to keep going when the silence from home is so loud it feels like a wall. Climb the wall. And when you get to the top, don't look down with anger. Look out with clarity. Because the view from up here, I can tell you from experience, is worth every year you spent climbing alone. My name is Dr. Eliana Vaughn. I am 34 years old. I am the youngest dean in the 160-year history of the University of Chicago. My mother, who first saw this in me, is forgetting most words now, but she still says my name. My father, who laughed when I asked for help, now sits in the back row of my lectures and takes notes, and that folder, the one I brought to his study when I was 18, the one with the tuition breakdown and the salary projections and the ROI analysis, it's framed on my office wall. Not because I need the reminder, because sometimes he stops by, and I want him to see it. If this story meant something to you, leave me a comment. Tell me about the person who doubted you and what you built anyway. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because I have more stories like this. And each one is proof that the people who overlook you are writing the first chapter of your victory. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.